Good morning. Merry weekend to you. It's just about a minute to 10 o'clock. Thanks to you for coming on this live chat. So, without taking much of our time, as usual, I'll just go straight into the reason why some of you will come on to this chat today. We would want to talk about what I themed the irony of secession. In some other videos and some writings, I've explained what secession is. I've also explained what self-determination is. I was able to strike a balance between secession and self-determination. You know, I've also on a lot of commentaries spoken about the the reason for the Igbo movement for secession. You know why Igbo feel the need to have their own country called Biafra. I've spoken at length about that. There, there have been a lot of agreements, there have been a lot of disagreements, but that's the beauty of stories, that's the beauty of history. So you should be able to make yourself available to be critiqued. But it's also important for us to learn to study history because one of our biggest challenges as a people is the fact that we do not really know our history. That's why when someone says something, there are a lot of counter opinions. Counter opinions are good, but when your opinions are countering, be sure of your counter opinion, be sure of the validity of your counter claim. So today we will talk about the irony of secession. The irony of secession is all about the interplay, the mix-ups about the whole idea of we want our country, we want to leave Nigeria, or we want to leave the zoo, like some people will call the country. Nigeria is not a zoo, anyways. And I'll set the pace by saying that if you looked at the history of the world, there is no country that have seceded and was better than the country they left. There has never been one. I've said it before, and I've been able to allow myself for correction. That someone to correct me when I say that there is no country in the history of the world that left a union like Nigeria on the basis of secession, that performed or outperformed the country they left. It has never been. I cannot say it will never be because I do not own the future, but from what we've seen so far, from what we've seen so far, I do not know of the possibility. So while you are asking for your own country, whether it is Biafra, whether it's Oduduwa, whether it's Niger Delta Republic, one thing you should have at the back of your mind is that there had never been a country that left a union on the basis of secession that ended up better than where they left. It's not possible. So let everybody have that. That's why I always feel that rather than put our energy into secession, we should use that energy. In fact, half the energy we put into secession, if we put into asking our leaders to get it right with us, that would be possible. The whole idea of they don't like us, we are marginalized, or we are politically excluded is an idea of politics. It is the politicians that make it seem as if these people don't like these people. Apart from that, we are generally a united people. Go and study all the ethnic or religious clashes, conflicts, or even war that we've had in Nigeria. There is none, not even one, that can be traced or traceable to individual conflicts. It's all as a result of politics. It's all as a result of political interest. When a politician from one region feels that their interest is being threatened by another politician from another region, rather than settle it between themselves, they'll go back to their people and start telling their people this person is the person that is blocking this from coming to you, or they do not like you. And their people start fighting each other. And the funny thing is that they might even get to a point where the two of them will reconcile their differences and become friends, but their people have already become enemies. And that is when they will be talking about secession. The funny thing is that the person that caused that rift between people, who will tell you they don't like us, that person will never be interested in the secession, but he will be interested in telling you these people don't like us. That's why you see our political leaders, they are not interested in the secession because they benefit from the unity of Nigeria. So what we are supposed to do as a people is to look for how we too can benefit from the unity of Nigeria. That's one. Two, there is nobody. These things are things we are not supposed to go over and over again, but it hasn't been solved, so we'll keep hammering until people get it. There is no leader, there is nobody, not even you, who just want to have Biafra, that if given the opportunity to be president of an entire Nigeria, would want to think about secession. Nobody have done that. Nobody will. Um, I should be certain enough to say nobody will do that. There is a thing about there's a supremacy that comes with ruling over a large expanse. So nobody will willingly, because you want secession, even if you have all the right reasons for it, nobody will give it to you. Nobody. You would only have to go about it coercively. And in our own case, Nigeria, we can't be coercive as much as the government is. In fact, they'll always beat us to our game. What do you want to use to outpower them and become your own country? The military, we think, is not working, especially with banditries and the rest of it. It's because they do not want the military to work. It's not that Nigeria don't have very wonderful military. We have one of the most reliable and most dependable military regime in West Africa, one of the biggest in Africa. We can do anything we wish to do security wise with the military we have. It's just that the military is politicized. So by the time you want to ask for a country of your own, that is when you will see how efficient the Nigerian military works. Then it's also important to understand that no matter the secession you will get, as long as there are two people who are from a different origin living together, there will always be these issues of perceived marginalization. There will always be these issues of perceived and sometimes actual favoritism, tribalism. It's human nature. In fact, even in our families, you know, there are leaders of families who give preference to this kid more than the other kid. Like if you're a parent or if you've got parents, you will notice say there is a particular kid of yours that you are more connected with than the other. It doesn't mean you do not like the others, but there is a particular one that you resonate more with. So that's how it is with political entities. So if they give you Biafra today, I'm sorry, I'm using Biafra because, of course, it's Biafra that is the most likely example. So if they give you Biafra today, Biafra have a lot of tribes in it. In case the Southerners wouldn't be a part of a Biafra, so you just have Igbo ethnicity. But within the Igbo ethnicity, there are a whole lot of tribes even within a state in the southeast. There are a lot of tribes. We've seen states in southeast that will only insist the governor comes from a particular region, a particular part of the state. All these things will always be there. So as soon as they gave you your secession, your new country, it wouldn't take long before some people will start feeling marginalized. You cannot escape that anywhere. So if marginalization was a reason you left Nigeria and you've got your own country, and then the people in that new country start talking about marginalization, would you let them go or would you hold on to them the way Nigeria is holding on to you? If you let them go, be prepared to accept the fact that your new country would not stand because people will keep going. So these are the ironies of secession. Again, if you wanted to go down the history of Nigeria, the Igbo are not the first people that have made secessionist moves. I've said that, I think, over the week. The Igbos were not the first persons, the first people that made the secessionist move. It was actually the Hausa Fulani or the Northerners, because the Northerners are grouped as a religion, as an ethnicity, as tribes. So they are the ones who first made the move because of what happened at the Federal House, what is today called the National Assembly. You know, there was a move by someone, Anthony Enahoro from the South, that wanted independence before 1960, but those of the North, said they weren't ready for independence. because they lacked what it would take for them to compete in the new country. So they needed some time. And then the South insisted and told them, like, you want to be slaves forever, you like to be slaves to the Europeans. It is better to have your own country where you can decide your destinies by yourself. But they said they weren't ready. But if you do not want to understand that we aren't ready, then you can go ahead and we would stay by ourselves and create our own country. That was a secessionist move, but it was frowned at. It was shut down, especially by Nnamdi Azikiwe. You know, a lot of people don't know the kind of leader Nnamdi Azikiwe was. In as much as Azikiwe was a ceremonial president or governor general, he was a representative of the queen. That was a very decisive position. He was looked upon as the queen, you know, the Queen of England controlled excessive power. Whatever the Queen said is not to be challenged by any other authority. So that's the position Nnamdi Azikiwe occupied, and Nnamdi Azikiwe frowned at it. And whatever he relates to the British hegemony is what is likely to be considered. So, and Nnamdi Azikiwe was an Igbo person. So that was the first time a secessionist move was made, and it was frowned upon by an Igbo person. Another one was after the first coup that was led by Kaduna Nzogu. But there is a lot of hypocrisy around these things. A lot of Igbo would want to say Nzogu wasn't an Igbo person, but that sounds funny. Ethnicity is not a territorial creation. Ethnicity is not territory. So I can be an Igbo, but I am in a state that is not in the southeast. Southeast is just predominantly Igbo. Predominantly Igbo means mostly Igbo. Doesn't mean if you're not located within the geography of the southeast, you're not Igbo. So I think a lot of people are just being hypocritical about it. The Cardinal Nzogu was an Igbo person. Nzogu, we know what it means. Some people want to say it's Anioma. What's the meaning of Anioma? Is Anioma a Yoruba word? Is it a Benin word? Is it a Delta word? Is an Igbo word. Even the Ned Nwoko that is pushing for the creation of Anioma state currently, one of his reasons was that if the Anioma state is created, it will mean 6 states for the Igbo, because the Igbo have 5 states currently in the geopolitical zone. So if there was an Anioma state, it will mean 6 states for the Igbo. When it comes to that, Igbo will celebrate it. But when they want to tell you that Kaduna Zogu was Igbo, you will say no, he was a Neoma. But when they want to tell you they are giving you an extra state called a Neoma state, so the Igbo will have 6 states, you celebrate it. That's hypocritical. It's ironical too. So it's the Igbo man that had always wanted other people to not succeed. The same thing happened with the Niger Delta. We know Adakaboro, he felt the Niger Delta region was, or the people of the Niger Delta within the Eastern Nigerian reality was being marginalized. that they have oil, but they were living in poverty. So he wanted to take his people and create or found their own republic, the Niger Delta Republic. It was Ojukwu who later became the leader of a secessionist group that discouraged um, the Niger Delta Republic. They got Adakaboro arrested, charged for treason, and was sentenced. You see the irony. So how does it make sense that the same person or the same people who had never wanted other people to succeed will later turn around to start asking for secession? I don't think that makes any sense. Again, it's the narrative of the forced marriage. The Igbo always talk about the marriage is not by force. If we want to live, allow us to live. You wouldn't bring people together under a forced marriage without their consent, and they want to leave, you don't want them to leave. The question is, was the unity or marriage, as it is called, of Nigeria actually or truly forced? Yes, to an extent it was, the amalgamation of the North and the South, those old protectorates. That was when we were under colonial rule. But at the point where the colonial masters were going to leave, at the rise of independence across the world, Nigerians or those that were representing Nigeria in government, because they are the mouthpieces of Nigeria. It's an indirect democracy. It's not the kind of democracy where everybody come together to have their say. So you're represented by leaders, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Ahmadu Bello, Awolowo, all these people. They were brought together in a conference, the 1960 Constitutional Conference, before they gave us the independence. Even though I do not believe we've had independence in the real sense of it, but before they gave us what is considered today as independence in 1960, they at least gave us the opportunity to decide what kind of country we want to have, away from what kind of country they have already set in the stage for us. They gave us the opportunity. And what did our leaders do? Awolowo, Obafemi Awolowo, in that constitutional conference, raised a very important point, and that point was secession. Awolowo said, I think he would have observed the political awareness and patterns of the country, and I've seen that maybe some people would get to a point where they wouldn't want to continue as Nigerians. And in his own wisdom, he suggested for the right to secede to be enshrined in the Constitution. He said, let there be a place for secession in the new country, in Nigeria, so that if there is any region that will later want to leave the Nigerian project or the marriage, they could easily do that constitutionally. That was just the most reasonable thing anybody could have thought of. But when he said it, the northern envoy or northern representatives were indifferent. They didn't have an opinion. After all, it would have even favored them because they had initially made a move for secession. So it would naturally be a welcome idea for them because they had already started feeling threatened within the Nigerian marriage. So they were indifferent. Any one way una choose, we did. Then the Igbo that had Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was like the mouthpiece of the gods, the queen's representative, he kicked against it. He was like, God forbid, that kind of chukwaju. There was a story that he was just busy taking tea in that conference. I do not know how reliable that is anyways, but they said he was in that conference just taking tea, and they were just pouring tea into his mug, and he was taking. And one of the representatives, I think Tafawa Balewa, felt he was embarrassing them, that he was taking too much tea, as if it was tea that we came here to take. And he spoke in Igbo to tell him to turn his mug, because if you left your mug open, it is assumed that you want some more tea. So he told him, Puchiko, as in Puchiko, close your cup. So what that could tell you was that this guy wasn't really interested in whatever they were doing. All he wanted was a Nigeria that would not give people the right to seek self-determination. And a lot of people would just think he was doing it because he loved the unity of the country. It might be true, but I do not believe that. I just think he was just being a selfish person. It's the idea of being the lord or ruler over a large entity. Because in his mind, he was already being prepared to become the first president. So it will be a very wonderful thing to be the president over a large entity like Nigeria. You'll be the president. It's amazing. Rather than create an opportunity for some other people to want to leave. So if your population, the population you ruled over was a population of 20 million, if 5 million leave, it becomes 15 million. So your power or influence is being reduced by 5 million. Nobody, no leader, sane or insane, will want that to happen. I think that was the goal of Nnamdi Azikiwe, and not necessarily because he loved the country to remain one. Nnamdi Azikiwe was just a politician like every other politician we have today, sometimes even worse. Yes, I can say that. If you study his personality, you would agree with me that it could be worse than some of these people we complain about today. The same Nnamdi Azikiwe who frowned on secession. He got to a point where he became a supporter of the Biafran secession. A lot of people do not know this part of history. In fact, when you say it to some people, they will argue. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Mr. One Nigeria, he supported Biafra. He supported because he saw that he was losing grip of the One Nigeria, especially when Ojukwu declared the Republic of Biafra, and it was succeeding. Even within the war, Biafra was succeeding. Biafra was making wave. Biafra was already building relationships with other countries, foreign powers. So the position of Nnamdi Azikiwe came under threat. So he had to start supporting Biafra. Yes, he did. But then there was a twist again. So all these are part of the irony. and we need to understand this. That twist came towards the end of the war. It got to a point where it was very obvious that Biafra would not succeed with the war. It was very obvious. Everybody knew about it. That was when Nnamdi Azikiwe did a turnaround again and started singing One Nigeria. He verbally attacked the Biafra leader, Odumegu Ojukwu. I think he called him a petty, was it petty bandit or petty something? You know, that's the hypocrisy of the personality of Nnamdi Azikiwe. But Nnamdi Azikiwe had the media, he had a newspaper outlet rather, where he was writing, and whoever controls the media controls the mind, and who have controlled the mind have controlled everything. So you could understand what Nnamdi Azikiwe did as a person. It was just about personal interest. It really didn't have anything to do with the love for Nigeria or the love for the Igbo. He just wanted to have a whole expanse of land, a whole people to control. These are ironies. I don't know if we get what we are saying. If there may be questions, you can ask your questions in the comment. And then moving on, you would understand that it is just about the interest of the politicians. For example, after the war happened, the person who led the war, or rather before the war was brought to an end, Ojukwu was told severally by different people to bring the war to an end. A lot of prominent people, Yoruba, Hausas, internationally, and even within his army, he was told, bros, this war, we no go fit win now. To save the life of people, just announce a peace make a peace proclamation. Give up. You cannot win. But whoever told him that was considered a traitor. Whoever told him that was considered an enemy of Biafra. And to an extent, if it was within his control, he will eliminate that person. He did it to a lot of people. But then people were dying, but his own family wasn't. His family was not. His family were not dying. He had his family protected, but families of others were dying. But he would never give up on it. And then it got to a point where it was very clear to him. It was staring him in the face. Rather than call for a ceasefire, he abandoned the people he was fighting for and ran away. He just left them in the middle of the war without any command structure and ran away. I don't think someone who have love for their people, someone who is saying he is fighting for the freedom of his people, would actually do that. It will make more sense if you called for a ceasefire, and then I am pretty sure he knew he wasn't going to go in for it, because all Gowon was doing was fighting for the unity of the country. At most, you would maybe become sentenced to prison. But he abandoned the war and ran away. The people that died, if the reason he went into the war in the first place was because the Igbo were being killed in the north. But the irony is that the Igbo that you wanted to save from being killed, and then you led them into war, the number of casualties recorded in that war outnumbered the number of the people you wanted to save. So what's the sense? What I mean is that if Igbo were killed to the tune of, say, 30,000 people, and then you went into war because you wanted to protect people from dying. So you wanted to not allow a situation where it will move from 30,000 casualty to maybe 31 or 32. But you ended up leading those same people into a war that claimed lives that ran into millions. So what have you actually achieved with your secessionist move? The only thing the secessionist move was able to achieve was that it created more problems for the Igbo. It resulted in more casualty, it resulted in more displacement, it resulted in what a lot of Igbo are wanting to call genocide, but I do not want to agree it was genocide. Genocide is when you are going after a race, that haven't really done you anything. Genocide is more like ethnic cleansing or religious cleansing. But that was a war. We were fighting. I had ammunition, you had ammunition. So you can't classify that as genocidal. So the war caused more harm. You can't even compare. Just like I said, if it was 30,000 people that were massacred, you who wanted to save the Igbo race led them into losing lives that counted up to millions. To what was the war for if it was to create more harm? And then he came back after the war into Nigeria. You see, that's where it gets funny. That's where it gets interesting. You came back after the war. I thought if you say Biafra or nothing, you would follow that to your grave. But you came back and not too long joined a political party. In fact, of all the political parties available to belong to, you belong to the one that carried Nigeria in its name. Does that really make sense? You didn't even try to, put your people together, try to reconcile. They were already lamenting that they were not being treated fairly after the war. That wasn't your area of interest. Your area of interest was to quickly become a senator. Just few years after you led them into an avoidable civil war. You've come back, the land is in disarray. Families are yet to recover. They were at that point, there were families that are yet to reassemble themselves. People were still looking for their families. But the only thing that interested you as the person who led them into this war was to contest for a Senate in the same Nigeria you said you want to leave. How does that make sense to you as an Igbo person? Don't you think you are being deceived by these people? And Unluckily for him, he lost in the election. So you could also see that maybe he didn't even have the support of the people, because if you so much love the idea of Biafra, you so much love your leader and you call him our leader, Ikemba, why wouldn't you give him a senatorial slot? You didn't need Hausa Fulani to give him a senatorial slot in Anambra. You could just give him he couldn't win a senatorial slot. So how popular was the Biafra leader if he couldn't just win as a senator with all the love? It didn't end there. A few years down the line, he started a political party that is still in existence. I think that political party is the party that has that produced that have been producing Anambra State governors. The current Anambra State governor is from that party, the All Progressive Grant Alliance. It was created by Ojukwu, the leader of the Biafran army that never was interested in Nigeria. So you came back and created a political party to contest to become the president of a country you never wanted to be a part of. How does that make sense? Why is it that we that are Igbo have refused to think? Why can't we think and see that something is not adding up? Maybe these people are just killing us for their personal interest. And then he came back and he reconciled with General Yakubu Gowon, the person that was his sworn enemy, the person that he was going to take down if he had the opportunity, so that he will have his dream country. They reconciled and became friends, exchanged pleasantries, they hugged, they moved on. His family wasn't affected, to the best of my knowledge, you know, but they left us still fighting each other, still trying to heal from the wounds that they created. But those that have created those wounds have moved on and become friends. Bro, it's a no-brainer. And I say we know if we think I'll be waiting. Okay, he went on to get married to, I think at the time, the most beautiful girl in Nigeria, Bianca. Since um, the since the Fourth Republic in 1999, Obasanjo's regime, the Nigerian government has been friends with the family of Odumegu Ojukwu since 1999. You can fact check me. Bianca Ojukwu have held a whole lot of positions, political positions in Nigeria. At the time, she was, I think she still is. I don't know, because I don't know if she is no longer, but I used to know that she was a permanent representative of Nigeria in the United Nations. I think in the Department of Tourism also. Bianca Ojukwu, the one whose husband led the Igbo into a civil war trying to break out of Nigeria, later became a permanent representative of Nigeria in the world. Does that make sense to you? Does it tell about honesty in their Biafra struggle, or does it tell about using these people to fight for our personal gains? There is no position. Bianca has become a foreign affairs minister. Bianca has become a senior special advisor to the president on foreign affairs. Bianca has become all sort of becoming. In Nigeria, the Nigeria her husband or her late husband led a whole race into into dying. She turned around to become too influential in that Nigeria. It's not just Bianca. Bianca's younger brother, I think Denge Ono, was the president. I don't know if he's president, they call him, or chairman of the Tinubu Shetima campaign organization in the southeast. What that means is that me, na me, the organize people wey go vote for Tinubu and Shetima for Igbo land. Do you know what that means? These are the families that led the Igbo into war to leave Nigeria. And then they come back to become a part of the Nigerian system that the same Igbo are currently complaining about. Why are the Igbo not looking towards that direction? Why is it that the people that led us into war against Nigeria are going back to become friends with Nigeria? Doesn't that mean Nigeria is the answer? Or in case you think Nigeria is not the answer, doesn't that mean there is something fishy? Doesn't that mean something is not adding up? Again, like I've said in the beginning, these people